Hello everyone, and welcome back to more Sketches by Boz, Charles Dickens' wry look at Victorian life in and around London and the counties as well. And we carry on with his description of what was going on in the parish. Maybe his parish, we don't know, but he seemed very well informed. Anyway, this is called The Election for the Beadle. A great event has recently occurred in our parish. A contest of paramount interest has just terminated. A parochial convulsion has taken place. It has been succeeded by a glorious triumph which the country, or at least the parish, it's all the same, will long remember. We have had an election for Beadle. The supporters of the old Beadle system have been defeated in their stronghold, and the advocates of the great new Beadle principles have achieved a proud victory. Our parish, which, like other parishes in a little world of its own, has long been divided into two parties, whose contentious slumbering for a while have never failed to burst forth with unabated vigour on any occasion on which they would be possibility be renewed. Washing rates, lighting rates, paving rates, sewers rates, church rates, poors rates, all sorts of rates have been in their turn the subject of a grand struggle, and as to question of patronage, the asperity and determination with which they have been contested is scarcely credible. The leader of the official party, the steady advocate of the church wardens and the unflinching supporter of the overseers, is an old gentleman who lives in our row. He owns some half-dozen houses and always walks on the opposite side of the way so that he may be able to take in a view of the whole of the property at once. He is a tall, thin, bony man, with an interrogative nose and little restless peaking eyes which appear to have been given him for the sole purpose of peeping into other people's affairs. He is deeply impressed with the importance of our parish business and prides himself not a little on his style of addressing the parishioners in a vestry assembled. His views are rather confined than extensive, his principles more narrow than liberal, and he has been heard to declaim very loudly in favour of the liberty of the press and advocates the repeal of the stamp duty on newspapers because the daily journals, who now have a monopoly of their public, never give verbatim reports of vestry meetings. He would not appear egotistical for the world, but at that same time he must say that there are speeches that celebrated speech of his own on the emoluments of the sexton and the duties of the offices, for instance, which might be communicated to the public greatly to their improvement and advantage. Now, this was the state of affairs in our parish a week or two since, when Simmons, the Beadle, suddenly died. The lamented deceased had overexerted himself a day or two previously in conveying an aged female highly intoxicated to the strong room of the workhouse. The excitement thus occasioned, added to a severe cold, and which is the indefatigable officer had caught in his capacity of director of the parish engine by inadvertently playing over himself instead of a fire, proved too much for a constitution already enfeebled by age, and the intelligence of once conveyed to the board one evening that Simmons had died and left his respects. The breath was scarcely out of the body of the deceased functionary when the field was filled with competitors for the vacant office, each of whom had rested his claims to public support entirely on the number and extent of his family, as if the office of Beadle were originally instituted as an encouragement for the propagation of the human species. Bung for Beadle, 5 small children. Hopkins for Beadle, 7 small children. Dickens for Beadle, 9 small children. Such were the placards in large black letters on a white ground, which were plentifully pasted on the walls and posted on the windows of the principal shops. Timkins's successor was considered certain. Several mothers of families half promised their votes, and the 9 small children would have run over the course but for the production of another placard, announcing the appearance of a still more meritorious candidate. Spruggins for Beadle, 10 small children, open brackets, 2 of them twins, close brackets, and a wife. There was no resisting this. 10 small children would have been almost irresistible in themselves without the twins, but the touching parentheses about that interesting production of nature and the still more touching allusion to Mrs. Spruggins must ensure success. Spruggins was the favourite at once, and the appearance of his lady as she went about to solicit votes, which encouraged confident hopes of still further addition to the house of Spruggins at no remote period, increased the general proposition in his favour. The other candidate, Bung, alone accepted, resigned in despair. The day of the elections was fixed, and the canvass proceeded with briskness and perseverance on both sides. The numbers of the vestry could not be supposed to escape this contagious excitement inseparable from the occasion. The majority of the ladies inhabitants of the parish declared at once for Spruggins, and the quondam overseer took the same side on the ground that men with large families always had been elected to the office, and that although he must admit that in other respects Spruggins was the least qualified candidate of the two, still it was an old practice, and he saw no reason why an old practice should be departed from. This was enough for the captain. He immediately sided with Bung, canvassed for him personally, in all directions wrote squibs on Spruggins, and got his butcher to skewer them up on the conspicuous joints in his shop front. Frightened his neighbours, he did, the old lady who's his great neighbour, into a palpitation of the heart by his awful denunciations of Spruggins's party, and bounced in and out and up and down and backwards and forwards until all the sober inhabitants of the parish thought it inevitable that he must die of a brain fever before long, before the election began even. So the day of the election arrived. It was no longer an individual struggle, but a party contest between the ins and outs. The question was whether the withering influence of the overseers, the domination of the churchwardens, and the blighting deposition of the vestry clerk should be allowed to render the election of Beadle a form, a nullity. Whether they should impose a vestry-elected Beadle on the parish to do their bidding and forward their views on whether the parishioners, fearlessly asserting their undoubted rights, would elect an independent Beadle of their own. Now, the nomination was fixed to take place in the vestry, but so great was the throng of anxious spectators that it was found necessary to adjourn to the church, where the ceremony commenced with a solemnity. The appearance of the churchwardens and the overseers and the ex-churchwardens and the ex-overseers, with Spruggins in the rear, excited general attention. Now, Spruggins was a thin man in rusty black, with a long, pale face and a countenance expressive of care and fatigue, which might either be attributed to the extent of his family or the anxiety of his feelings. His opponent appeared in a cast-off coat of the captain's, a blue coat with bright buttons, white trousers, and that description of shoes familiarly known as by the appellation of high-lows. There was serenity in the open countenance of Bung, a kind of moral dignity in his confident air, and "I wish you may get it" sort of expression in his eye, which infused animation into his supporters and evidently dispirited his opponents. The ex-churchwardens arose to propose Thomas Spruggins for Beadle. He had known him long. He had his eye upon him closely for years. He had watched him and his twofold vigilance for months. A parishioner here suggested that this might be termed taking a double slight, but the observation was drowned in the cries of "Order! Order!" He would repeat that he had his eye upon him for years, and that this would say that a more well-conducted, a more well-behaved, a more sober and more quiet man with a more well-regulated mind he had never met with before. A man with a larger family he had never known. Cheers! The parish required a man who could be depended upon. Hear, hear, from the Spraggan side, answered by an ironical cheer from the Bung party. Such a man has now been proposed. He would not allude to individuals, the ex-churchwarden continued in his celebrated negative style adopted by great speakers. He would not advert to a gentleman who had once held high rank to the service of his Majesty. He would not say that a gentleman was no gentleman. He would not assert that the man was no man. He would not say that he was a turbulent parishioner. He would not say that he had grossly misbehaved himself, not only on this, but on former occasions. He would not say that he was one of the discontented and treasonable spirits who carried confusion and disorder wherever they went. He would not say that he harboured in his heart envy and hatred and malice and all the uncharitableness. No, he wished to have everything comfortable and pleasant, and therefore he would say nothing about him. The captain replied in similar parliamentary fashion. He would not say he was astonished at the speech that they had just heard. He would not say he was disgusted. He would not retort to the epithets that had been hurled against him. Renewed cheering at this point. He would not allude to men once in office, but now happily out of it, who had mismanaged the workhouse, ground the paupers, diluted the beer, slack-baked the bread, boned the meat, heightened the work, and lowered the soup. Tremendous cheers again. He would not ask what such men deserved. A voice saying, "Nothing a day and find themselves." Yes, of course. He would not say that one burst of general indignation should drive them from the parish they polluted with their presence. He would not allude to the unfortunate man who had been proposed. He would not say as the vestry's tool, but as Beadle. He would not advert to the individual's family. He would not say that 9 children, twins, and a wife were very bad examples for the pauper imitation. He would not advert in detail to the qualifications of Bung, the man before him, and he would not say in his presence what he might be disposed to say of him if he were absent. Here, Mr. Bung telegraphed to a friend near him under the cover of his hat by contracting his left eye and applying his right thumb to the tip of his nose. On the following day, the polling began, and we've never had such a bustle in our parish since we got up the famous anti-slavery petition, which was such an important one that the House of Commons ordered it to be printed on the notion of the member of the district. The captain engaged 2 hackney coaches and a cab for Bung's people, the cab for the drunken voters and the 2 coaches for the old ladies, and greater portion of them, owing to the captain's impetuosity, were driven up by the pole and home again before they recovered from the flurry sufficiently to know, with any degree of clearness, who and what they had been doing. The opposite party wholly neglected these precautions, and the consequences was that a great many ladies who were walking leisurely up to the church, for it was a very hot day to vote for Spruggins, were actually decoyed into the coaches and voted for Bung. The captain's arguments, too, had produced considerable effect. The attempted influence of the vestry produced a threat of exclusive dealing was clearly established against the vestry clerk, and a case of heartless and profligate atrocity. It appeared that the delinquent had been in the habit of purchasing 6 penn'orth of muffins weekly from the old woman who rents a small house in the parish and resides among the original settlers. On her last weekly visit, a message was conveyed to her through the medium of the cook, couched in mysterious terms, but indicating with sufficient clearness that the vestry clerk's appetite for the muffins in future desponded and depended entirely on her vote in the leadership. This was sufficient. The stream had been turning previously, and the impulse thus administered directed its final course. Thus, the Bung party ordered 1 shilling's worth of muffins weekly for the remainder of the old woman's natural life. And the parishioners were loud in their exclamations, and the fate of Spruggins was sealed. It was in vain that the twins were exhibited in dresses of the same pattern and nightcaps to match to the church door, the boy in Mrs. Spruggins' right arm and the girl in her left. Even Mrs. Spruggins herself failed to be an object of sympathy any longer, and the majority attained by Bung on the gross poll was 428, and the cause of the parishioners triumphed. So there you go. The dirty dealings going on there, I think. But that's the parish as it was. We'll be back soon with some more details of other people and other goings on in the parish. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please give me a thumbs up. Be nice to see. And if you haven't, fair enough. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye now. Stay safe. God bless.